So if you were with us last week, we were going through the parable of the sower, where Jesus, of course, he's walking around and he's teaching, and he gave what I described to you as my favorite parable, and and it really truly is. It's one of the ones I think about all the time. I think about how Jesus is that good sower. He's that one that sows good seed, and he's going to expand upon that today because this is how Jesus spoke. He spoke in parables, and some people ask, why would Jesus speak in parables? And we're going to kind of unpack that a little bit this week as we go through, starting here at the parable of the weeds in verse 24. It says, Jesus told them another parable. This is the crowd that he's teaching. Remember, he went out onto the water. He's teaching from the boat. It says, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. And the owner's servants came to him and said, Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from? And an enemy did this, he replied. So the servants asked him, Do you want us to go and pull them up? No, he answered, because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at that time, I will tell the harvesters, First, collect the weeds, tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. Now, this is another one of those special parables that Jesus is actually going to explain. He's going to explain it later on, and we're going to get there today. He starts it in verse 36, but we still have the parable of the mustard seed in the middle. But one of the things people like to ask, well, why would Jesus talk in parables? Why not just speak in a way that would be so simple for everyone to understand? But the fact of the matter is that it is simple to understand if you bother putting in the time and the effort. And by that I mean this. Most of you guys are well connected. You guys got, there's a lot of you here that are family, let's face it. You have your own little idioms that you use when you're talking to each other. And I'll use an example. I knew a family once. It was a pastor that I worked for. They had an idiom in their family, and they would say, it's the new oatmeal. Do you remember that one, Rebecca? It's the new oatmeal. And I was always like, what on earth are they saying? The new oatmeal. And it was an idiom. It meant something. They weren't even talking about oatmeal, but the idiom, the new oatmeal, meant something to their family. And what it went back to this time where they, for whatever reason, every time they went shopping, they were getting more and more oatmeal, but no one was eating the oatmeal, so it just kept building up in their cupboards. So the idiom, the new oatmeal, started to become the thing whenever you went out and you were buying things that no one wanted or used, and it just kept building up in your house. They would be like, that's the new oatmeal. Now, of course, if you're an outsider and you don't know that story, you go, well, how on earth was I supposed to know that? And that's exactly how I feel about the parables. If you're trying to understand the parables of Jesus Christ without bothering to spend some time getting into the Bible, reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, you're not going to understand them. What on earth is Jesus talking about? Wait a minute, when I plant my seed, I get weeds anyway. And what is this with this guy? Who's this nasty person who's going around just planting weeds in people's gardens? We got to find him, Gloria, because he's causing a lot of trouble. He's been in my garden several times this week. Right, and so we go, wait a minute, like this doesn't make any sense, but it does if you've sat there and you've gone through the Bible and you understand, wait a minute, I can see what Jesus is talking about. I know what Jesus is talking about. Not because I'm any smarter or because I'm much more intelligent or there's some sort of secret knowledge that Jesus has imparted into me, but because I've taken that time to spend the time with Jesus, spend that time in prayer, spend that time reading the Word. And it makes sense once you understand there's the little idiosyncrasies in that relationship. Now, Jesus is going to unpack this in a little bit, so I don't want to go too far with this one. So we're going to read the next one, the parable of the mustard seed and the yeast first. It says here in verse 31, he told them another parable. And this is one that often gets misquoted, and you'll see why. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. And though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked through all of the dough. Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter the things hidden since the creation of the world. Now, this is the first parable of the mustard seed. And the reason I say it's often misquoted is because there's another instance where we talk about faith of a mustard seed, and for some reason, people go, mustard seed, this is the same thing. No, it's not. Right? He very clearly begins this by saying, the kingdom of heaven is like. He's trying to help people understand, what is the kingdom of heaven? Because remember, the Jews have just gone through like over 1,000 years of terrible persecution. Right? If you were here with us when we went through the book of Daniel, you'll remember how awful that persecution got when the Seleucid Empire finally came and dominated over Israel. It got really, really bad to the point where they tried to utterly destroy every last papyrus, every last clay tablet, every last reference to God at all. This is why, by the way, it's the miracle that our scriptures even exist. Right? Because despite even the most concerted efforts by the most powerful organizations, the most powerful governments on the planet, they could not stop the word of God. And what Jesus and all of them are waiting for this kingdom of heaven. Every one of them. Right? The reason that the Messiah, the reason that these people, and remember, you've heard me say before, Jesus was not the first one to claim to be Messiah. He wasn't. There had been many who had claimed, there have been many who pretended, there have been many who'd come forward, and they're all waiting essentially for a warlord who's going to come forward and lead them into this great kingdom. And then Jesus comes along with these statements like, well, this is actually what the kingdom of heaven is like. It starts small, it's tiny. But when it's taken care of, when it's nurtured, it grows and it blossoms and it blooms. And I wonder if you know, how many continents all across this planet does the Christian faith exist on? I'm going to say probably 7, because I'm sure one of the people that lives down in Antarctica probably is a Christian, because outside of out of the most public academics and intellectuals, actually, despite what most people think, it's actually a slight majority of like major academics and scientists tend to be Christian. See, here's the thing. It started off with one man. And it's as I told you before, the reason why I think that Jesus had such a good mind for this. He understood exactly what it took. He realized I could go there and I could try my best to disciple a huge crowd. But instead he chose the 12. He chose the 12 to be his inner circle because he realized if I teach 12, then the 12 will teach 12. And then that becomes 144. And then the 12 teach, those 12 of the 12, those 144, they're going to teach 12. And it just expands and it grows and it grows and it becomes this exponential, massive thing. And if you've ever seen a mustard tree, they are huge and beautiful. Still, again, maybe you're not as familiar with mustard tree, but maybe you've made bread. Anyone here ever made bread? I make bread all the time. Yeah. How much yeast do you need? That's right. But you don't need much at all, right? Even if you're making just regular bread, you get like a tablespoon of yeast. If you're making sourdough, you don't even need that much. 60 pounds of dough they're talking about here. I was like, that's 3 bags of flour. Because I buy the big bags. That's 3 bags. That's a lot of dough. And what they're trying to tell you is, yeah, it doesn't take that much. But once it gets in there, it weans its way through, it infects its way through. And Jesus, my bad. Jesus has used this analogy before where he says, just a little bit of leaven can leaven the whole batch. Right? It doesn't take a whole lot to make a big difference. And as any of you here can know who have made bread, if you don't let it leaven long enough, it doesn't go quite right. Right? So you got to leave it. It takes time and patience. Right? Jesus talked to them in this way, and it makes sense to us, to those of us who have been in the church, who've been a part of this, because we go, yeah, I can see that. I can see it now because I've experienced that. I've seen it for myself. And if you're from the outside, you go, what on earth is this guy talking about weeds and bread for? What is going on? So in verse 36, it says he left the crowd and he went into a house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain this parable of the weeds in the field." So he answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man, who is Jesus. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one. The enemy who sows is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age. The harvesters are angels. As weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels. They will weed out his kingdom, everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace. They will be where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears, let them hear." There's a couple things with this. One is, of course, he makes it clear, hey, I'm talking about the end of days. The other thing I want to mention really quickly here is something that, of course, many of us here are quite familiar with. Right after the service today, we have the funeral for RJ. And in times like that, one of the things that comes up quite often in the way that we feel, especially when it's someone so young, when it's when someone with children, when these things happen, we go, why would this happen? How awful is it that this happened? Why him? Why now? Why does God allow these kinds of things to happen? And he just spelled it out for us. Why? It would do more damage for him to uproot all of evil. The amount of damage it would do to the kingdom, the amount of damage it would do to the good people, the amount of damage it would do to those that are innocent. It would do more damage to them if he uprooted all evil right now than it would be to say, you know what, I'm going to wait and I will deal with it. I promise you, there will be cosmic justice. There will be justice at the end of this age. And I will make things right. And he will. He will. Another thing that is mentioned here is he says that all who are righteous will shine like the sun. I want to ask you, as Christians, we got a better idea. But of course, these are Jewish disciples, right? They're Jewish men. So they've been taught all their lives because they haven't, they're still learning from Jesus. They're still getting there. We have the benefit of knowing, the end of the story. We know how this rolls out. But they're hearing this and they're thinking, oh man, I still got to do everything perfect. Right? Maybe the Pharisees were onto something. We, of course, know the difference, right? Paul, as we were going through the book of Acts, and Paul made it very clear, there's no one righteous, no, not even one, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. None of us are perfect. None of us have righteousness by our own hands. The very righteousness that we can experience, the very righteousness that comes into our lives, isn't because of us, it's because of the gift of Jesus Christ and the love that he feels for us. It's about of his goodness, his righteousness, his glory, that we are able to be saved, that we are able to be selected, and it is by his mercy that we are going to be able to one day stand before the Father in the kingdom. So it makes you wonder, right? Because this comes up all the time. And you certainly hear it from non-believers. I feel like once you're kind of in the church for a while, it finally starts to click. You kind of get it. It's like, wait a minute. No, I get it. Like, yeah, Jesus saves me, but I want to do it because I love Jesus and I want to live for him. Right? Because as I've said to you before, intent matters, right? The end of the age is always kind of marked as like this courtroom idea that we're going to be judged and God's going to take a look at us and see what's actually going on. Because here's the thing. If you're just saying to Jesus that I believe in you because you're trying to check another box, is that what Jesus asked of you? No. Right? But there are people that feel that way. There are believers that feel that way. And they say, well, I believe in Jesus, but I still have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this. I need to because I need to somehow earn my own way into heaven. I was watching an interview with the great John Lennox the other day, and it was funny. He was trying to explain this to an atheist. And he's like, okay, yeah, I get that. Like, okay, so I'm saved by grace and I understand. But like, haven't I been a good enough person? And he goes, there it is again. You keep coming back to this wrong idea that you're good enough. None are good. No, not even one. It is only by the mercy of Jesus Christ. And it is only if you want to spend eternity in heaven with him that you'll be brought with him. People say, well, if he was a good God, why can't he save everyone? Would you say that a good God would force his will on each and every person that doesn't want to spend eternity with him? Does that make sense to you? No, that doesn't make any sense at all. If they're opting out from Jesus, if they're opting away from God, then so be it. You've made your choice. It's fine. But Jesus doesn't stop there, and I want to continue on here today. Verse 44, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that is hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy, he went and sold all he had and bought that field. And again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and he bought it. Now, I'm not sure if this clicked for you, Rebecca, but this is that parable that I heard that bad teaching on, and it really drove me nuts. Because what is this about? It's about the kingdom of heaven and what it means to us. Here's the thing. When we finally see it, when we finally understand it, when we finally fully get the grasp of what it means to be in the kingdom of heaven, boy, do we ever see the value in that. And I don't mean just value as in, oh, I don't need to die. I mean, like, we're talking everlasting joy. We're talking about life everlasting with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the God of the universe. We're talking about an everlasting love. And imagine just being in this idea of pure euphoria. Like, it's amazing, this idea that we get to exist and walk and talk with the Father, that we get to walk and talk with our ancestors, and we get to... and with the children that are to come, like, it's amazing to me that this will all exist, and it is so good, so valuable, that it is worth everything that we own. It is worth the sacrifice of what we have. There's no earthly possession that is worth more than to join the kingdom of heaven. Right? Jesus is really trying to get them to understand, not only is this going to spread, not only is this going to go all across the world, but it'll be the most valuable thing that can ever be perceived, ever be possessed. Finally, in verse 47, once again, he's really trying to drive this point home. The kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore, and they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but they threw the bad ones away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come. They'll separate the wicked from the righteous, throw them into a blazing furnace where they will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood these things? Jesus asked. Yes, they replied. He said to them, therefore, every teacher of the law who becomes a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old. Here's the thing. We do this all the time. And I was actually talking to Rebecca about this just yesterday, where we have Jesus, and he has these teachings about what's going to happen at the end, whether we go to heaven or hell, whether we live in paradise or not. And what I find interesting is sometimes he does this, where he's talking about the blazing furnace. Sometimes he refers to it as the garbage dump. Sometimes the one thing that I think that we can all agree on, right, because there's a lot of dispute about what hell actually is, what actually happens, all this stuff. But one of the key things that we can understand is God's not there, and that's going to really suck. If God is love, and God is joy, God is patience, gentleness, kindness, self-control, if God are these things, the fruits of the Spirit, and that's not there, that sucks. And many of us may even think to ourselves, yeah, but who would ever choose against that? You haven't met enough people. I've met those people. People who don't deny God, but hate God. It may be perplexing to us who have had God enter into our lives and do amazing things. It may be perplexing to us who have allowed God to come in and speak to us and transform us and allow us to actually live the very best way that we can live. And guess what? As I've said before, it doesn't mean that it becomes easy. It doesn't. Being a Christian is hard. It's very hard. To live the way that Jesus called us to live is very difficult. But it's worth it. Right? It's one of these things that I've been seeing more recently. There's been, of course, we're seeing the crumbling of the nuclear family. We're seeing how things are just absolutely falling apart in our society. And we're kind of seeing a call back with young people, and they want to kind of go back to tradition. But it's funny, they're going back to tradition while also trying to drag all these other new world things with them along the way. And they're going, why doesn't it work? And it's like, well, because you're not really doing it the way that it was prescribed. Right? It's like I've mentioned this when we talked about fasting, where I knew people that were trying to fast, and they said, well, I wasn't eating, but once a day I would have like some bone broth, or once a day I would have some juice. And I'm like, well, that's why you're getting sick. You're not doing it properly. Right? If you're not doing it the way that you're supposed to, and I know it's difficult, and I know it's a struggle, and I know it's challenging, then you're not going to get the results that you're hoping for. Right? Can you imagine baking a cake but you don't have eggs and you go, but it's fine. It'll work without them. What's going to happen? That's right. It's not like your cake's not going to turn out. You want to make a chocolate cake and you don't have chocolate, that's a bit of a problem. It's not a chocolate cake. Right? If you want to get the very results, if you want to have the things in for your life, because remember, we talked about this, when God handed down the law, he didn't hand down the law because he said, I want you to do these things so that way you'll be saved. He said, I want you to live this way, do these things, go this way, so that the life will go well for you. Right? He was trying to lay out a path that said, if you want life to go well, if you want to be fruitful, if you want to be successful, this is how you do it. Because salvation only comes from the cross. But, and many of you maybe can feel this way. I know I have in the past. Verse 53. When Jesus finished these parables, he moved on from there and he came to his hometown. He began teaching people in their synagogue. They were amazed. Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers, they asked. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother Mary? And aren't those his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? By the way, not Judas Iscariot, different Judas. Up until this time, Judas was a very popular name. After Judas Iscariot, not very popular anymore. Aren't all his sisters with us? Where did this man get all of these things? And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except for in his own town and in his own home. And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. Here's the thing. We've talked about this before. What is faith? Because I feel our world gives one definition of faith, and they say, oh, it's blind trust. And it's no. Faith is trust. And we build trust based on evidence. I believe that my wife is faithful to me because all of the evidence says that she's faithful to me. And I believe she will continue to be because she's never given me any reason to doubt. I believe that Jesus' word is good because all the evidence points to that he has lived up to everything that he said he was ever going to do. He has fulfilled every promise that he ever said he was going, that he ever made. He continues to be with each and every one of us, and he continues to lead and to guide us. And for those of you who don't have a prayer life and haven't felt that in your life, I would encourage you, take that time, spend that time in prayer, and allow God to transform your heart, because then, guess what? It's all about building up. It's all about building up your faith, building up trust, because guess what? I didn't start my relationship with my wife immediately thinking that she was 100% completely trustworthy. That took time. We built a relationship over time. And that's what we have to do with Jesus. See, Jesus is giving us all of these pointers. He's showing us all of these things. He's telling us about the wonderful glory of the kingdom of God. He's trying to help us to understand just how good this is, how great it will become. But all of it is fantasy unless we actually trust him and put our faith in him and say, you know what? step by step, I'm going to give you a little bit more, God. I'm going to give you a little bit more because maybe I'm not ready to jump in quite yet, but I'm going to keep dipping my toes in the water. And you know what, God? Eventually I'm going to get there. See, Jesus knows exactly where your heart is. He knows if you're genuine. He knows if you're genuinely seeking after him, and he knows whether or not you're seeking after him in that way. So we got to ask ourselves, right? How are we living our life? Are we actually seeking after him? Are we actually trying to be genuine and go after him? Do we actually see the value of the kingdom of heaven? Because if you don't, the only question you should have is, why don't I? Jesus has given you everything you need. And there are people around you, sitting around you right now, who know exactly how valuable that kingdom is, what it means to them, and who would be willing to share with you. So the question becomes, are you willing to keep building up that faith, building up that trust, building up that relationship with Jesus, or are you just happy with where you are? Because I don't know about you, but I'm going to keep building because I want to continue to see what the Lord has in store for me.